Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, on page 35 in your textbook, we're going to be starting job 11. With job 11, basically what we're doing is Carmen is giving us information that we're going to be going through and we're going to be calculating payroll. Now, payroll is typically everyone's favorite part of a job. Would you agree? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to be setting up a spreadsheet that's going to help us calculate it. And in this spreadsheet, there are going to be some pretty complicated formulas. Okay, some are going to be easy, and there's going to be some formulas that are going to come up. They're going to be if statements. And if statements make you think a little bit more for doing formulas. If I'm just multiplying, adding, or subtracting, it works pretty easy. But when we do some if statements, we have to think a little bit more. But the first thing I want to do is we need to look at our directions from Carmen. So basically, we're given the task of calculating payroll, and they want you to create a payroll spreadsheet. So we're going to be making a new spreadsheet, but we're going to be using some of our information that we have in our employee spreadsheet. Okay? So in our new spreadsheet, let's take a look at the columns that we have to have. We have to have first name, and we have to have last name. Rate, hours, regular wages, overtime wages, gross pay, federal tax, FICA tax, state tax, city tax, total withhold, and net pay. You will need to create formulas to calculate the wages, net pay, and so forth. You can save time by copying some information from the employee spreadsheet. Below are the hours each employee worked last week. So you can see we have all of the list of hours there for our employees, but what we need to do is if we look at our employee spreadsheet, which columns can we copy? That I just said. First name? What other one? Last name? And one more. Do we need address? Does it say that? The rate. Because the rate is how much money those people get paid per hour. So we need that in order to go through and calculate our payroll. So it makes no sense. If we already have a spreadsheet that has our name and rates already typed in, we don't need to go through and retype that. It seems like a waste of time to me. Even though I like for you to type and practice typing, if it's already put in someplace, we don't need to do it. So I have my employee spreadsheet up here, and then I have another blank spreadsheet here. So I do want you to go ahead and create another spreadsheet. And if you want to split screen so you can see them both, that would be amazingly awesome. I didn't say a new sheet on the bottom. I said a new spreadsheet. Completely new document, because you're going to save it with a different name. So you're going to go File and New. No, in Excel. Upper left, File. No, in Excel. The word File in the upper left-hand corner. You're not in Excel. Oh. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to copy our information. So I'm going to highlight first name down, okay? I could actually go, because they're next to each other, I'm going to do first to last name. Notice my name is already added in there, right? Okay. So I'm going to highlight first name and last name, and then I'm going to copy. So I'm going to right-click, copy. Then I'm going to go to my new spreadsheet, click in A1, then I'm going to right-click. There are lots of different paste options when I go from Excel to Excel. I have paste, I have values, formulas, transpose, formatting, and paste link. I don't need to do anything special. I can just go ahead and click on just paste. Now, what was the other column I wanted to copy? Besides first name and last name? Rate. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to column J, highlight down, right-click, copy, go back to my new spreadsheet, and I'm going to put it in column C, and I'm going to go ahead and paste. Now, one of the things I want to point out after I did that, because I didn't have to type anything here, please make sure your name is on line 12. If you did not have your name on line 12, that means you did not have job 10 done. Line 8 here, Mackenzie. What's happening with Mackenzie's name? It's getting cut off because on my employee spreadsheet, that column was a little bit wider. So what I need to do is I need to make A wider. The easiest way to make A wider is I'm going to go up on the very top on this heading right here between the letter A and B. And I'm going to move my cursor, and it's going to give me an arrow that points each way. So I'm going to move my cursor up there between A and B, and it has an arrow, and I can drag that over so I can read all of Mackenzie's first name. And same thing for the last name, because Edmonds has got a long last name. And I'm going to drag it over just so I can see all of their names. So can you please go through and do that on your new sheet? Make sure that you can read all of their first names, their last names, and their rate. Now, the next thing that we have to do is what is our next heading we need to do? What comes after rate? Hours. So in D1, I'm going to type the word hours. But now, when I hit enter, you can see it actually did keep it formatted. I do want to make sure that hours is capitalized just so it matches all of my other headings. So you need to make sure that you have your headings on the top that you copied over from our other spreadsheet. Now, after hours, the next column that I am going to need is going to be called regular wages. Then I'm going to have overtime wages. Gross pay. I'm getting all of this from page 35. It's all on page 35 in your book. Then go through and plug in their hours. They are not in the same order. Get their hours from page 35. We saved this document as payroll. We have to go through and calculate our payroll. Okay? So the first thing that we have to do is we have to go through and figure out what their regular wages are. Okay? So regular wages pretty much means how much they get without overtime. Okay? Overtime means that that employee came in and they worked more than they were typically supposed to. Does anyone have a parent or somebody in their family they know that sometimes gets overtime? Okay, great. Colvin, what is the magical number where they start getting overtime? 40 hours. How about for you, Dale? 40? Carmen? 40. Okay, and the reason I ask that is sometimes people can get paid overtime if they work more than 8 hours in a day. Okay, so it's not necessarily how much they work in a week, but if they worked more than 8 hours in one day, they could get overtime. And some people are, if you work more than 40 hours in a week, you would get overtime. In our example here, the number of hours that they work, do you think that's for 1 week or 2 weeks? 1 week. Would you agree? Because we have some people that are under 40, and we have some people that are over. So what has to happen for us to calculate payroll? It would be really nice if there was nobody that got paid overtime. Because when people get paid overtime, their rate of pay changes for overtime. So if my regular rate is $12.15, if I work overtime, I get 1.5 of that rate. So I make more hours. But as an employer, I need to know how much money I spent on regular earnings and how much money I've spent on overtime earnings, because that would be a business decision. Because if I have employees that are consistently working overtime, that costs me a lot of money. As a business, if I'm the business owner, it may be cheaper for me to physically go through and hire somebody new, because that would be a little bit more cost efficient. So we calculate our regular hours for anyone that has earned 40 or less hours a week. And if you've earned 40 or less hours a week, you would take your regular rate times how many hours you worked. So for example, if Raymond worked 33 hours this week and he got paid $12 an hour, I would just multiply 33 by 12. The hard part about our formula that we need to do is we know on this spreadsheet that we have some people that work more than 40 hours, right? Didn't Brent work 52? Is that his number? 56? Thank you. So he worked 56 hours, so he has 16 hours worth of overtime that we need to calculate. And he doesn't want to get paid at the regular rate. You would be mad if you got paid at the regular rate. So we have to do what is called an if statement. We have to have our formula look to see how many hours they've made. Okay? If they have earned more than 40, we're only going to take 40 hours times the regular rate. If they haven't earned more than 40, then we want them to take the number of hours that they really worked and times it by the regular rate. But here's the thing. When we create formulas in spreadsheets, we always use our cell references. And again, cell reference is going to be the cell that you're in. And if I look in the upper left-hand corner of my screen right now, where is my cursor? V1. Do you see that right here? So at any given point, if you want to know where your cursor is, you can look right here, and that would tell you where your cursor is. If you wanted to very easily jump to a certain cell and you didn't want to scroll a bunch, you could go ahead and type right here, A3, and it would put your cursor in that spot as well. So that's another way of moving around Excel. So what we have to do is we have to go through and put in an if statement in our regular earnings. Now, how do we write an if statement? We have to do equals if. Because Excel is smart enough, it can tell if it's true or false. Okay? We have to ask, the very first thing we put in a parenthesis, it's going to say equals if, and we're going to put in the parenthesis. The very first thing that we have to do is we have to have it's conditional. What do I mean by conditional? That's that question where we say, is this equal to this? Okay? It's going to be, it has to be, the answer needs to be either true or false. Then the next thing that we do with an if statement is I'm physically going to put in a comma, and then this is going to be what happens if it is true or yes. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in here, and this is going to be with a comma. What is it going to do if it is false? Or no? So when I think about this formula, that is how we write any if statement, is we do equals if, we have a conditional, comma, what happens if it's true, comma, what does it do if it's false. And sometimes if statements can be this long. Ours is not going to be this long. Okay? But here is our if statement. So what we go through and do this, we're going to write if. Now, what do we want to check? What are we checking to see if it is true or false? Hours less than 40? What happens if they make 40? Then it's just 40, or should I say 40 and less than or equal to 40, right? So, because that would encompass having 40 and less. And that's a key thing, because if we would have said less than 40, 40 is not less than 40, and it would have thrown off our formula for people that worked exactly 40 hours. So we need to think about that. We want to do if our hours is less than or equal to, and if I was doing that as a mathematical function, you're going to do less than and equal to, like that, right? Would you agree that would be if you were in math class, you'd write it that way? Now, do we have a key like this? So how could I do less than or equal to? Right? Would that be less than and equal to together? Okay. So we have less than and equal to. So we're going to have if our hours is less than or equal to 40. Now here's the kicker. When I say hours, what cell is that? If I was doing it for our very first employee for Howard, what cell has his hours in it? Look on your spreadsheet. D what? Nope. Are you sure? You're guessing. D2, would you agree? So instead of hours, I would really do D2, because D2 is my actual cell. Okay, so now, if D2 is less than, do I have it backwards? Less than equal to 40. I always have to think sometimes my less than and equal to signs. What do we want it to do? If it is less than or equal to 40. What's that? They don't get overtime, so what are we going to multiply? Rate times their hours, would you agree? So what is their cell for rate? C2 times D2, would you agree? So this is going to be if it's true. What are we going to do if it's false? I have a lot of looks like this at me right now. This is a lot of thinking for 8 in the morning. Fine, you got it? What am I going to do if it's false? Okay, well, what am I going to do with 40? Yes. So what I need to do here, instead of using C2, I'm going to actually say just take 40, and then I'm going to multiply 40 by D2. Does that make sense? So, in your regular rate for Howard Shin, that is going to be the formula that you are going to enter in. That one right there. Okay? I'm going to pull the screen down and I'm going to type it in there as well. So don't worry, I'm not making it go away. So, in E2, the first thing you have to do when we start with the formula is start with what? How do we know it's a formula? Buy and give it to me, you know. Equal sign. If I want Excel to do math, I have to start with an equal sign. Then the next thing that I need to do is I am actually using a function formula, so I have to type in the function I'm using, which is if. So I'm really going to type in equals and then the word if. And notice when I do that, Excel says, hey, you know what an if statement does? It checks whether a condition is met and returns a value of true and another one if it's false, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to do equals if, and then I'm going to do my left parenthesis. I'm going to go ahead and click on, I like to click on cells because I'm very visual, so I'm going to click on if D2 is less than or equal to 40. Then I'm going to put in a comma. What am I going to do if it's true? I did not space at all. I do not have any spaces in my formula. So if it is less than 40, I'm going to take my rate times my hour with a comma. So I'm going to do C2 times D2. If it's false, that's where I'm going to do 40 times my rate. And then when I hit enter, it gave me regular wages of 660. Did you guys get that? You ready to test it? Now, if I change my hours here to 50, will my regular wages change? Will this number right here change if I change my hours to 50? Will it? It shouldn't. Why? Because why? Because our if statement says if this cell has to be less than or equal to 40. So if I change this 52 to 39, will that number change? Is 39 less than 40? So I'm going to plug in here 39, and notice it did change. So I was just going through and testing my formula to see, hey, is this working? Now the other thing is, notice that it says 660 there, but don't you kind of expect that to look like money? Does that look like money yet? No. It just looks like 660, but not $660. What would make it look like money?
The dollar sign.
Dollar sign would help. What else would help? Decimal points, would you agree? I think 2 decimal points. Now, I don't want to put a dollar sign on everything on here because I think it's going to make it super busy. But let's go through, and would you agree everything from E2 to M13 is going to need 2 decimal places? Agreed? So I'm going to highlight E2 to M13. And I'm going to go to my home ribbon. And in my home ribbon, right here, I have some options. The other thing that's going to happen is we might have some people that are in the thousands. And if they're in the thousands, don't we want commas? So I'm actually going to go right here. I'm going to do the comma style. And when I do the comma style, it automatically will give me 2 decimal places. I'm not adding the dollar sign to it because too many dollar signs make it confusing. Colvin, you're missing some people on your spreadsheet. Okay. Now, we made this pretty complicated formula. Don't you think we just had to think a lot in order to do this? When I'm looking at my spreadsheet right now, I can tell in cell E2, the answer is 660. But when I look up here, this is in Excel called our formula bar, and this is our complicated if statement. I need to go through and have that same formula for Ying, Darrett, Jared, Juan, Jordan, Mackenzie, Brent, Carmen, Felipe, me, and Edmund. It's a lot of typing. Right, Brian? Or is there an easier way? There is an easier way. How do we do it, Brian? Okay, if you notice this little rectangle right here in the lower right-hand corner of that cell that we have the formula in, When you put your cursor on that area, you get what is called the fill handle. This is important because you have to have your cursor in that lower right-hand corner of the box. You can try in the lower left and it won't work. But what it will allow you to do is, Excel is smart. It will realize you probably might want that same formula down on the next row, and then maybe even the next row and the next row, and it will allow you to have it fill down so you don't have to type it over and over again. We like that, right? So what happens is it realizes on line 2, we probably need everything to reference to line 2, but when we copy it down to line 3, it updates our formula, so instead of using C2 and D2, it actually updates it to C3 and D3, and so forth and so on all the way down. So if you go ahead and grab in the lower right-hand corner of cell E2, you get a black crosshairs. You can click and drag down. And you just calculated all of their regular wages. How's that? That was a lot of thinking for today. Now, I'm going to save the next if statement portion for Monday because we need to do another if statement for overtime, right? Because overtime we want to do if it's over 40, we need to go through and take your hours, subtract from 40, take that and multiply it by your rate times 1.5. So it gets even a little bit more complicated. So you can go ahead and save this spreadsheet for now because I know I won't have enough time to go through and complete that. The other thing is